So let's start from the very beginning. You say it's a 90-year cover-up.
Just about, yeah.
90 years?
1933 was the first recovery in Europe, in Magenta, Italy. They recovered a partially intact vehicle.
It's long been known that the regime of dictator Benito Mussolini documented numerous UAP during this time. This internal memo from the Italian Secret Services includes crude drawings of the UAPs. It's true, it's real.
Yeah, that actually happened. The Italian government moved it to a secure air base in Italy for the rest of kind of the fascist regime until 1944, 1945, and you know the Pope Pius XII back-channeled that.
So the Vatican was involved?
Yeah, and told the Americans what the Italians had, and we ended up scooping it.
So let me be very clear about this. You're saying that the Catholic Church, the Vatican, they know about the existence of non-human intelligence on this planet?
Certainly.
Grush says shortly after the dawn of the atomic age, another major crash recovery took place. You've probably heard of it.
I am Lauren Ross Diedrichsen, Colonel, USA retired. I got a Bachelor of Science degree, and then the Air Force sent me to the Stanford Business School to study management, and then promptly assigned me to Washington, D.C., and I served in the Chief of Staff's office shortly for orientation, and then they put me into the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission, where I became responsible for maintaining the inventory of the accountability of the nuclear weapons stockpile, and involved in the security and the, you might say, auditing the manufacturing facilities and the storage facilities for all the nuclear weapons in the U.S. And I was there, while I was there, I had my first incident with UFOs, which in mid-July they flew over Washington, D.C., and I saw my first 9 UFOs.
What year was this?
This is July of 1952. And then further on, I finally retired from the Air Force and joined the Boeing Company, where I was assigned to the Minuteman program, where I was responsible for the configuration accounting of all the nuclear fleet of Minuteman 1, 2, and 3. And during that period of time, I also learned about incidents involving nuclear weapons. And among these incidents were a couple of nuclear weapons sent into space were destroyed by the extraterrestrials. In talking to various contacts throughout, they would allude to the fact that these did happen. There was, for example, the missile, Minuteman missile, which destroyed the launch from Vandenberg Air Force Base. That's now a public matter of record. The one incident, for example, was they actually photographed the UFO following the missile as it climbed into space and shining a beam on it, which neutralized the missile. And this was recorded. It was all hushed up, and they split up the team that observed it, but of course eventually the news came out, and it was later published and confirmed it. In fact, they were taken so seriously that the reporters would often not report them because it involved so much bureaucracy and protocol and etc. They deliberately would not report them. Almost cases where the UFOs became identified, at least on a radar or with reports, why they would try to scramble aircraft to intercept them. It was a very aggressive, you might say, response from our own government. And that is their major concern, is to preserve the integrity of the Earth, because it affects their own system. Well, there was one incident when we exploded a nuclear weapon over the Pacific, and this was in about '61, I believe. And the consternation that it caused, because it shut out communications entirely over the Pacific Basin for a number of hours, in which no radio transmission was available at any time. And this was very significant, and of course This was one of the things that the extraterrestrials, later I learned, were highly concerned about, because it affected our ionosphere, and in fact spacecraft were unable to operate because of the pollution in the magnetic field of which they depended upon. The very end of the 70s or the early 80s, we attempted to put a nuclear weapon on the moon and explode it for scientific measurements and other things, which was not acceptable to the extraterrestrials.
And what happened?
They destroyed the weapon before it got to the moon. With reference to the incident which our government sent a nuclear weapon for explosion on the moon's surface, it was tended to, as I understand it, to assess some scientific data and reaction and so forth. The idea of any explosion in space by any Earth government was not acceptable to the extraterrestrials, and that has been demonstrated over and over.
And what's the consequence? How is that demonstrated?
By the destruction of any nuclear weapons sent into space. In some cases, there were confirmations of radar. Yes, at the storage facilities particularly, because they were in or near military installations. Yes, that's true. Shortly after I retired from the Air Force, and I still was maintaining contact with friends and associates at the various places, and on Colonel Parker and the Air Defense Command, the Space Command particularly, I would run into him. He mentioned an incident which I later confirmed. A spacecraft went to the rescue of Apollo 13, and they accompanied Apollo 13 on their voyage around the moon and back to Earth. And on 2 occasions, they thought they might have to transfer the crew to their spacecraft, but they saw them safely back to the Earth. People were interested in the extraterrestrial technology, very much so. In fact, that was the time when Area 51 became notorious.